Welcome back to Where's My Diagnosis? I'm Karen Gately. In this episode, Carrie puts her trust in a new team of doctors, but the cracks keep widening. From questionable surgical choices to dismissive explanations, in this episode, we're going to dive into the early signs that the system wasn't just missing things, it might in fact be rewriting them.
Ooh.
Okay, Carrie.
Ooh.
The plot thickens. But before we get too far down the path, let's pick up from where we were last time. So one of the things that you said was that, one of the parts of the diagnosis was an incidental endometriosis diagnosis. So interested to go back to that. But how did your care shift when you were basically handed over to a new team?
I wasn't getting any better, so I was released into the care of my GP, and she was seemingly concerned as I was dropping weight unintentionally. The nausea and vomiting continued. I was struggling with my bowels, and I was trying to explain to them, no, it was different to constipation. And they kept saying, well, you're just constipated. Here, take this. I'm like, no, it's not that. And then, so like you said, when I was diagnosed with a rare appendix tumor, they said there was an incidental finding of endometriosis in the left-hand side of my body. That's what they said to me. And I mean, I was 46, never had a bad period in my life. So I just kind of went, oh, okay. Doesn't really ring true. But as I was getting worse and worse, my GP said, well, it has to be the endo, because they said you're fine with, like, you're okay. You were cured with this surgery. And it didn't feel like that was what was happening to my body. I had a pretty good grasp of my own body, and they took my appendix, and then I never recovered. So yeah, they said, well, let's see if we can treat the endometriosis, and they introduced a private gynecologist who chemically induced menopause by injecting me with Zoladex, I believe it's called, and that stopped my period. But it kind of replicated what menopause would feel like. So I was getting the hot flashes, and none of those were an issue. It was just my bladder. It felt, I didn't know it at the time, but it was nerve pain, because I'm very familiar with nerve pain now, but that was the first time I'd ever experienced nerve pain, and it was in my bladder. And then I had eventually, I guess I'm jumping the gun, but yeah, my bladder became a huge, my bowels and my bladder, and then the nausea and weight loss and just pain. I had a lot of pain, and they just said, oh, it must be the endo. I'm like, really? At 46? Interesting. Okay.
So what was done for the endometriosis?
Well, the chemically inducing menopause, and that didn't do anything but kill my bladder. So they stopped that after 3 months, and then they said that they were going to remove my tubes and my left ovary, as they said that was the one that was diseased with endometriosis.
So then I think we were just all laughing because we're like,
it's absurd.
And I guess perhaps we have a little bit of hindsight.
Yes, they've been on the journey.
Exactly, and seen the whole picture. So, okay, so we've done the inducing of menopause.
Yeah.
That still hasn't changed.
No.
The outcomes made things worse is how you're feeling about it.
And in between that, I was being admitted to, not admitted, but I would end up at emergency. So I had gone like 10 days without my bowels opening, and then I was admitted for 6 days in hospital, and they treated me for constipation, and basically treated me like a constipated anorexic was how it was kind of being, just can't even think of it. Yes, that tough word. Yeah, how it was being communicated to me was I was a constipated anorexic.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, no worries, but yeah.
So any other scans done during this period in 2022?
Yeah, well, so after that, so along with the gynecologist was my GP got Peter Mac involved, and I was given an oncologist. So I met with him, and so I was under his care, and at the 6-month mark, Peter Mac ordered a CT scan with contrast. So I had the internal ultrasound in January, and then they removed my appendix. And then 6 months later, I was given the all clear. There was it's called NED, no evidence of disease. And I still was no better. But they just were saying, and the oncologist would just say things like, that's really strange. It's so weird. And yeah, so I didn't know what was wrong. And there was, no answer. And I was just getting worse and worse.
And therefore no treatment plan?
No, it was just the wait and watch, or watch and wait, or whatever they call it. And with Lamin, apparently it's not really considered that dangerous, or it's not even really taken seriously, not even considered a real true cancer. And so Peter Mac somehow had got my pathology that was a stage 4 cancer. And it's a stage 4, once it goes out, you can't put it back in, making it a stage 3. It doesn't make any logical sense. And so Peter Mac downgraded my tumor to a stage 3, which then basically dictated my level of care down to nothing. So that sort of bumped me out of the system, I guess. And they weren't really interested in treating me. And so I had to pay for this private gynecologist who said that, my prayers would be answered and all the pain to go away and the nausea and everything that was all connected to endometriosis, including, by this point, I think I was about 46 kilograms. And if they're going to put that to endometriosis and menopause, I don't know anybody that.
What's your typical weight?
My fighting weight?
Yeah.
Probably about 52. So I'm not huge, but at that point, I because it was, COVID, and I got up to 57, that was big for me.
Yeah.
And so I guess that was good too, because I went from 57 to 50 when I got out of hospital after they took the tumor out.
Yeah. And
then when I met the oncologist 3 months later, I was 47 kilograms. And the lightest I got to was 38 kilos. And that was just before Christmas this year.
Yeah.
So, I don't know anyone in the throes of menopause ever complaining about, I just can't keep this weight on.
Yeah.
Just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
It's not the typical story.
Not the typical complaint of a menopausal woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're out of the system now. There's basically no hair around you. I am aware that then 6 months later you get a CT scan, a PET scan 2 months later.
What brought those on?
Yeah.
The CT scan was a 6-month CT to see if I had
a checkup thing.
Okay.
Well, you have, after they take a cancer out, they want to see if it's spread anywhere. So
they threw you out of the system in terms of broader care, but they were still doing the check-in.
No. Well, sort of. But then I paid for the gynecologist because it's a 2-year wait if endometriosis is the problem in the public system.
In the public. Yeah. So up until now,
But getting the CT scan was driven by the initial
diagnosis of appendix cancer. Okay. So that's just a given. So at 6 months, they just do a 6-month scan to see where the cancer's at, or if it's if they had if it is in fact gone. And then they said to me that there's no evidence of disease. And I was like, okay, well, I'm still sick. And then the gynecologist was saying, because it's the endo. I was like, okay. And then I wasn't getting better. And then she said, well, once we do this surgery, then, that should solve all your problems. And it didn't. I was getting worse. And then I guess the care was suboptimal anyway. But then once I started pushing back and saying, you know what, endometriosis isn't really ringing true for me. And hang on a second, what happened to that right ovary a year ago that was diseased? Why did they leave that in me and just take the appendix? So I had all these questions and no answers. And so they were getting kind of snarky with me. I was getting snarky with them. I was getting no better. And they were just basically starting to blame it on psychosomatic. So I was being called a cancer phobe, which I find hilarious. Anybody with cancer would be worried about cancer coming back. I'm not sure why that makes you a cancer phobe. And who isn't scared of cancer? Like, how do you feel about getting a little cancer, Kev? You want a little bit of prostate cancer? There you go.
Yeah, it's not exactly what people are hoping for.
Yeah, they just treated me like the hysterical woman, basically, was what just kept. That was the pattern that continued to emerge, was they're actually not able to answer any of my physical symptoms, which I've never complained about. Me too, was the appendix tumor. So it's not like I was popping hospitals looking for,
So yeah, you're starting to ask more questions, and it sounds like you're becoming the pain, and they're painting you in the
pain in the appendix.
You're a real pain in the appendix. But actually now you're just annoying, and as you say, hysterical about it. So there's that old.
But I wasn't hysterical. No. That's the thing. And they just kept, as we go along, it just, this year I'm over it. But the whole way through, I was just accepting of everything they said. And I was just getting really down on myself, just going, why can't I get better? If it's just this low grade cancer, just a slow burn, that's no big deal. Why am I so sick? I'm not a vomiter. Why am I vomiting all the time?
So at this point, Carrie's hearing a lot of, don't worry, it's nothing serious. So even as her symptoms escalated, there were constant dismissals and just that growing sense in her that something was obviously critically wrong. Carrie, when did you first hear the term your little cancer?
Oh, I heard that the first day I met my oncologist. It was, yes, at Peter Mac, and he in the colorectal wing. That's where I was at, unfortunately. And so he called me in and he started reading my file, and he's went, oh, Lamin. And I just went, yeah. And he said, how'd you get here? And I just said, my GP referred me. And then he said, oh, well, isn't she clever? And I just said, well, not really. Aren't you an oncologist? And then he said, well, yeah, but you don't really have cancer. It's just a little cancer. Anybody would rather your cancer. And then he proceeded to tell me about how in his 20s he had real cancer. And
what the actual fuck?
Yeah. And in hospital, he goes, I had real cancer in my 20s and I spent months in hospital. And I was like, oh, yikes.
That is just, there is so much just in this moment.
This
is one moment.
Yeah, tell me.
Well, I just think God, where do you start? So just the belittling of your experience, the total disrespect for the mental and emotional state that you
just the patient experience. I was scared.
For the average person, I'm assuming that you've got cancer is probably one of the worst things you're ever going to hear.
Yeah.
And then to be entrusting a medical specialist, because at this point, let's remember that you've already been battling this for a period of time. You're desperate for answers.
Mm-hmm.
And to be told that. So that was the first thing I think I react to. And then just the whole, compared to mine.
Yeah.
It's like, what is that?
I know. And he had a big bandage hanging off his right ear. So I don't know if it came back, but, his little cancer on his ear didn't look too good.
Maybe it was a patient annoyed with him.
Yeah, Mike Tyson.
Lauded him around smacked him around the ear, you reckon?
But yeah, that's downplaying and dismissive and
it's so wrong.
As you say, belittling.
Yeah, everything. And then just all the gaslighting and everything started. And I would just describe my symptoms. And they were legitimate symptoms. I later found out that, and he would just say things like, "That's so strange. That's so weird."
The same oncologist.
Yeah, same guy.
So talk to us about that. So you go and see this guy. He belittles you and all of that.
My little cancer.
So what does he actually do though?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But belittle me and then told me about the terrifying surgery that it takes to, if you're going to have any chance of getting rid of the disease, you have to have this thing called CRS HIPEC. So the CRS is they gut you from sternum. So yeah, like breastbone to pelvis, and they open you up and then they scoop out all of the mucinous snotty tumor and then scrape it off of the organs because it's like a sheath tumor that can just kind of encapsulate your organs. So they peel it off of all of that as best they can. And then when they have everything as much as they can get, they close you back up and then put 4 more holes in you and then stick tubes that pump a heated 42-degree chemotherapy into your abdomen, and then they shake you. So you're on a table and you're being shaken in this barbaric fashion. And he's banging on and really just bragging about this surgery and how scary it is and how he's, it can go anywhere from 12 to 25 hours it can take to have this surgery done. And you lose multiple organs. You can lose your rectum. You end up with a bag. You lose your bladder, another bag. Your quality of life is awful. You're in pain for the rest of your life. And it's just, it's not ideal.
So going back to the point where you've had the surgery, diagnosed with the cancer, at that point they're saying it's high risk of this
recurrence
condition now being throughout your body. Is that right?
PMP? No, that's what they should have said. That's what the pathology said. The pathology stated that I should have been closely monitored because I was at high risk, which is between 40 and 70% risk of developing the disease called PMP, which is pseudomyxoma peritonei. And it's considered a cancer, but it behaves differently to cancers. And what it does is it will disseminate. So like I was saying, the appendix creates the snotty mucin, and then that mucin escapes, or the cells escape in the body, and then it'll land wherever it lands. And then the mucin just starts to develop, and then it'll have cancer cells in it. And then the tumor is created from there. And then you just get all these like snotty things. If it's a low grade, I think it's more the stuff that they can just scoop out. And then if it's the more higher grade, that is the stuff that can encapsulate your organs and also can infiltrate and go into the bloodstream. And then your tumor markers will pick it up. But your low grade cancers, because they don't infiltrate or don't travel via bloodstream or lymphatically, it's not picked up via tumor markers or in the bloods.
Yeah.
So what I'm just wanting to make sure that people are able to understand is why the show is called, for example, What is My Diagnosis? Yeah. It's because you obviously have done a lot of your own research, etc.
So much.
And obviously, as we know, we're going to unpack that in a lot more detail in future episodes. But so, you know, what we're saying is that nobody has yet reached a point where they have formally diagnosed you with that.
Yes, they formally diagnosed me with low-grade appendiceal mucinous neoplasm, but they did so without molecular staining and IHC.
It's a bit hard to understand then if you've been diagnosed and then it's a watch and wait.
Mm-hmm.
Why 3 years down the track we're still watching and waiting?
Well, I've been completely boxed out of the system, and I guess in the episodes we'll jump back. But yeah,
so much to share, dear listeners.
Oh my God,
so much to share.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got a little cancer in this guy's mind.
A little cancer, yep.
And so what is he saying about your symptoms?
So strange, so weird, odd, weird. And so that wasn't helpful.
No.
And then took that and run with it. Weird.
And then what does he want to do?
Nothing. So I had to, listen to the weird, strange, odd until the 6-month scan when they said, well, you're, no evidence of disease. And I was just, I was astonished because I'm pretty tough and nothing really gets me down and down for long. And so for them to say that there's no reason for my symptoms made no sense to me. But they said the scans are clear, and so I just had to accept that. And meanwhile, my chest and breathing was still bad, and I had a lung function test, and I was told that came back clear. So it was looking more and more like this was psychosomatic. That's basically the angle they were pushing.
So what was your emotional state at this time? How are you coping with all this?
I was so confused and scared and just, everything I had known of myself and my ability to endure and withstand pretty significant painful experiences. It's just like, why can't I recover from a little cancer and a little surgery that took that tumor? And people just the medical community just kept telling me that everything was fine, and so I just kept trying to recover. And then I found this rare, like, an appendix cancer support group. And it was an American, it started up by an American, but I started going, it was on Zoom, and every Thursday morning I attended that group for 2 years, and I learned so much, and I heard so many stories, especially from other women who were misdiagnosed with, ovarian cancer first, because with the appendix, I think it's 50% ovarian involvement because I guess it's so, like, proximity wise, it's so close. And then endometriosis, constipation, all the things that they were nailing me with. And even fibroids, because I had apparently a couple of fibroids that they wanted to keep an eye on because there was internal flow and vascularity. And I didn't know what any of those things meant back then. And so I just had to start doing my research. And then they said they'd closely monitor me because of the vascularity. And they never did. They never closely monitored me at all.
We're still in the public system though, aren't we?
Yeah, still in the public system.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at what point did you start to have serious concerns, doubts around your GP, your gynecological team, obviously, your oncologist there? At what point did you start to question, are these people actually operate in my best interest?
Yeah. Well, the gynae surgery never added up because the lab didn't conduct a thorough evaluation of the specimens. And once again, no molecular staining, like I said, was used. And
so what made you start to suspect your GP and the gynecologist, the oncologist, as not necessarily acting in your best interests?
Yeah, just continued to belittle me. He should have had more to do with the gynecologist. So given it was a rare cancer and the gynecologist wasn't an oncology gynecologist, she was just a plain old garden variety gynecologist. And he just took a massive step back and was kind of nowhere. And so my care just fell into the hands of my GP and this gynecologist. And then she had filmed the entire surgery. She told me she would, and she would give me the USB of the surgery. So I took that and eventually watched it, and it was horrifying. I mean, my stomach is not great when it comes to gore and gross type things, but I just started watching that thing like a Cirque du Soleil performance, and I'd see different things, and I'd go back and watch, and I'd see something else that looked, just like it didn't belong there. You just saw all this over my bowels. You'd see this white candle wax type stuff just everywhere. It just looked horrible. And she never reported any of that. She never reported what was just any of it. Anything just was never reported. And then my stuff was sent off. And like I said, it was never stained. So how did they definitively rule out the rare cancer?
And obviously, as we talk further, we can shed a bit more light on why it is that you have drawn those conclusions, that what you were watching in a video, even though you're not obviously a trained surgeon, why you're looking at that and saying that doesn't add up, that's not normal, etc. So we're going to take the listeners obviously on a bit of a journey around.
Well, it took me 2 more years to work out that. Like, I'd watch it and I'd just be like, wow. And it's easy to count how many things that she's listing in her surgical report, so there was, let's just say there were five implants on the right ovary. She only got rid of one of them and didn't know what it was called. She had question marks around it, and the different things she'd name it, I would go and look up images for that specific thing. And I was like, well, that's not it. That's not it at all. And then I also had a friend who's a GP of 40 years. And then since then, I had an oncologist who used to head the Peter Mac peritoneal unit tell me that those do not belong in the pelvis. Those are, in fact, peritoneal mucinous implants, which is what the appendix creates. And then that's fluid, like the way it just gets carried around and then just deposited, and then it grows from there. So that's how it spreads. Yeah.
So I guess to sum that up, in this point in time, you've got red flags going off because you're just not getting answers that make sense.
Yeah.
You're working through procedures that aren't getting to any helpful outcomes.
Yeah, and they're not reporting some of the things that is happening during the surgery, like when she.
But that's coming later, in terms of your awareness of that.
Well, I found I found it odd when I started watching it, and then she just, for example, when she cut through the one of the fallopian tubes, and it just poured with stuff.
And to think that there's just so much more to go in the story. It's just extraordinary. So let's sum up now in terms of the big question marks, Carrie, or the big questions in your mind. At this point in your journey, what are you asking yourself?
Why were high-grade features of the initial tumor pathology overlooked?
Yeah.
Why wasn't staining conducted to then reach a definitive diagnosis? So to pinpoint the subtype of cancer, to make sure that the appendix was the primary organ and not the ovary, because both were affected at the same time. And how can I be 46 years old and reach the end of having a period and suddenly have endometriosis and all of these catastrophic symptoms that don't even align with endometriosis?
Yeah.
I have questions.
Yeah.
I have questions.
I think they're very reasonable questions in my mind. I have a question. How is it that you can have a specialist oncologist who says something like, well, my cancer is bigger than your cancer? It's like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, the whole experience has just been a real head scratch.
Yeah.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, that is very mild.
It is.
I've heard you describe it in other words.
Yeah, I know. More colorful.
Which is understandable. Well, on that note, we'll call that an episode, wrap that up. Thank you, everyone, for listening. To support Carrie on her search for answers, follow her on Instagram and X. Visit her website where you can view the evidence for yourself. We invite medical experts to comment on inconsistencies in various reports that we will be sharing. Continue on this journey with us and join us next time.
Where's my diagnosis?
Yes, we will get.
Where is it?
Seriously,
where is it?
We'll get into the next batch of questions, serious questions that need to be asked.
TikTok doctors.
Thanks.